Today's message is Exodus chapter 6. At the end of chapter 5, you can see the discouragement that came to Moses and to the people. For example, in verse 19, the Israelite foreman realized they were in trouble when they were told, "You are not to reduce the number of bricks required of you for each day." When they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them. And they said, "May the Lord look upon you and judge you. You have made us a stench to Pharaoh and his officials, and have put the sword in their hand to kill us." So we see they voiced their frustration to Moses. Moses then does the right thing. He goes to the Lord. Moses returned to the Lord and said, "O Lord, why have you brought trouble upon this people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble upon this people, and you have not rescued your people at all." So then we break into the passage that we're looking at, Exodus chapter 6, verses 1 to 8. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh because of my mighty hand. He will let them go because of my mighty hand. He will drive them out of his country." God also said to Moses, "I am the Lord, Yahweh. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, where they lived as aliens. Moreover, I have heard the groan of the Israelites, whom the Egyptians are enslaving, and I have remembered their covenant. Therefore say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians, and I will bring you to a land I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you as possession. I am the Lord." And there we see that God steps in. And this is really the title of the message. God steps in. There are moments in life when God's promises feel distant and his timing confusing. And this is exactly where Moses found himself in Exodus chapter 6. He had obeyed God, gone to Pharaoh, spoke boldly, and everything seemed to get worse, not better. We already read the passage at the end of chapter 5. The people were discouraged. Moses felt inadequate, and the situation looked impossible. Into this discouragement, God spoke a powerful word of identity, assurance, and promise. So firstly, we see in Exodus chapter 6, God reminds Moses, "Now you will see what I will do." And we'll read this in verse 1. God doesn't start by explaining the why of a delay. He starts by revealing the certainty of his action. He tells Moses that Pharaoh will not just release Israel, he will drive them out of his country. Read that at the end of verse 1. So what feels like resistance today will become the very means God uses for our deliverance. God often waits until human strength is exhausted so that his power becomes undeniable. You remember Paul said in 2 Corinthians 12, "My strength is made perfect in weakness." That's what God spoke to Apostle Paul. Secondly, in verses 2 and 3, God reveals his name and nature. God reminds Moses, and of course this is starts and ends our reading. Verse 2, God also said to Moses, "I am the Lord, Yahweh." And if you read verse 8, the last phrase is, "I am the Lord." And this seems to be the emphasis of the passage. The Lord Yahweh is the God who is faithful, present, and unchanging. The patriarchs knew his character, but Israel was about to see his power in ways never witnessed before. Sometimes God doesn't change your situation immediately because he is first revealing himself more deeply. When you know who God is, you can trust what he says. Then verses 4 to 5, we see God calls Moses to remember his covenant. God points Moses backward to the promises he made to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Genesis 12, Genesis 15. He reminds Moses that he had heard the groaning of his people and that he remembered his covenant. This is not because God forgets, but because he wants us to remember that he is a God who keeps his word. And this should encourage you as a Christian. Your prayers are heard, your suffering matters, and none of God's promises have expired. And then in verses 6 to 8, God gives 7 unshakable promises. To a discouraged Moses and a suffering servant, God lays out 7 powerful commitments. Verse 6, I will bring you out from under the yoke. I will free you from bondage, free you from being slaves in the passage. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. I will take you as my own people. At the end of verse, I think that's verse 7, middle of verse 7. I will be your God. Again, verse 7. I will bring you into the land I promise. Verse 8. And then I will give it to you as inheritance or possession, we read at the end of verse 8. Every promise begins with I will, not you will, or not you must, and not Moses' will, but God's will. And so Moses' deliverance did not depend on his strength, it depended on the faithfulness of God. Of course, these 7 promises echo in the New Testament. Remember, God has called us out from the bondage of sin. He's given us redemption. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 7, we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins. We are now God's people. 1 Peter 2, a people for his possession. And where we belong to Christ. And Titus 2:14 says we've been redeemed from all iniquity. And so God's promises are meant to lift our eyes. Israel was discouraged. We read this in verse 9. Moses reported this to the Israelites, but they did not listen to him because of their discouragement and cruel bondage. Just sometimes like we are as Christians, but God does not ask us to feel strong. He asks us to look to him. What God's about to do is bigger than Moses' fears, bigger than Pharaoh's power, and bigger than Israel's despair. And the same is true today. When the situation looks impossible, remember that God says, I will. And so as we finish, 4 things. When you face resistance, remember God is still working. Romans 8:28. God works all things for our good according to his purpose, and that purpose is to make us more like Christ. When you feel forgotten, remember he hears your groaning. Psalm 34, verse 17 and 18 says the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. When you feel stuck, remember deliverance is his speciality. Psalm 40, if you read the first 3 verses. And then when you feel faithless, remember God remains faithful. 2 Timothy 2, verse 13. Your confidence is not in circumstances, it's in the God who keeps his promises. Thank you for listening.